The air inside the mansion hung heavy with the scent of old paper and wax as Eleanor spread the collection of letters, torn photographs, and faded documents across the expansive oak dining table. The dim candlelight flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper and the worn surface beneath her fingertips. Each letter was a whisper from the past, an echo of secrets long buried beneath layers of time and silence. Eleanor's eyes, sharp and scrutinizing, traced the looping script of Lillian's words, the anguish and bitterness barely concealed between the lines. As the night deepened, Eleanor's mind raced, piecing together fragments of information that painted a complex portrait of a family fractured by concealed emotions, greed, jealousy, and revenge motives that seemed all too human, wove an intricate tapestry behind the facade of respectability. It was no longer just a story of inheritance and mystery. It was a story of passion and betrayal that had festered in the shadows of the Victorian mansion. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft creak of the library door. Charles Wentworth entered, his presence as imposing as ever. Clad in his usual impeccably tailored suit, his cold eyes flickered over the scattered documents before settling on Eleanor. The tension in the room was palpable, like a taut wire ready to snap. "Miss Blake," Charles began, his voice smooth but edged with something harder. "I trust your investigation is proving fruitful." Eleanor met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "Fruitful enough to see that the past is not as neat as it appears, Mr. Wentworth," his lips pressed into a thin line. "Some truths are better left buried." The muffled ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to mark the seconds as the two circled each other verbally, each weighing the other's words for hidden meaning. Later that evening, Eleanor found herself across from Margaret Ashcroft by the fireplace. The matriarch's silver-streaked hair shimmered in the firelight, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a worn handkerchief. Her voice, though steady, was laced with sorrow and bitterness as she recounted the grievances that had torn the family apart. "They were blinded by ambition," Margaret whispered, eyes misting over. "Promises broken, trust shattered. It was never just about money." The crackling flames seemed to echo the emotional heat of her confession, illuminating the raw pain beneath the veneer of dignity. The next day, Eleanor met with Thomas Reed, the family historian, in the mansion's overgrown garden. Twilight swirled around them, the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine mingling in the cool evening air. They walked slowly along the gravel path, exchanging observations and piecing together the final threads of the mystery. "The letters reveal more than just the facts," Thomas mused. "They expose the emotional undercurrents, the jealousy, the resentment that drove one to murder." Eleanor nodded, her gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. Understanding the motive is the key to unmasking the killer. It's the heart of the matter. As they stood beneath the slowly darkening sky, Eleanor felt a surge of determination. The tangled web of family secrets was beginning to unravel, and with each revelation, she came closer to exposing the truth hidden for over a century. But with the stakes rising and loyalties shifting, she knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and that the next steps she took would be critical in bringing justice to the shadows of the past. The mansion seemed to whisper around her, its walls steeped in history and secrets waiting to be uncovered. Eleanor glanced once more at the letters spread before her, the inked words a testament to lost lives and unspoken truths. The journey was far from over. The wind howled fiercely outside the Victorian mansion, the rain battering the ancient window panes like a relentless drumbeat. Inside, the drawing room flickered with candlelight, shadows dancing across the ornate wallpaper and polished wood. Eleanor Blake sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, her sharp eyes sweeping over the assembled family members. The storm had been brewing all afternoon, but now it seemed an apt accompaniment to the tempest she was about to unleash. "I've called us here because the silence has become unbearable," Eleanor began, her voice steady despite the knot of tension tightening in her chest. "We can no longer pretend the past is buried, nor that the truths hidden away won't come to light." Margaret Whitmore shifted uneasily in her seat, her fingers twisting a delicate handkerchief. Thomas Blake's jaw clenched, eyes darting between Eleanor and Henry Caldwell, the enigmatic stranger whose presence still unsettled the room. Henry stood near the fireplace, his tall figure silhouetted against the flickering flames. A calm yet somber expression etched on his face. "You speak as though you know everything," Thomas snapped, breaking the fragile silence. "But what proof do you have that any of this matters? That any of our secrets are worth dredging up now?" Eleanor met his glare with unwavering resolve. "Because the letters, the hidden rooms, the shadows in the garden, they all point to a truth that has been kept from us for too long, and it's time we faced it." A sudden crash of thunder punctuated her words, the storm outside echoing the rising storm within the room. The family members exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of unspoken memories pressing down on them. Margaret finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something I've kept hidden. A letter I destroyed years ago. It implicated someone we all loved, and I thought protecting that secret would spare us pain. But perhaps it only deepened it." Eleanor leaned forward, sensing the breakthrough. "What letter? What did it say?" Tears welled in Margaret's eyes as she recounted the confession she had concealed, a revelation that shifted the entire narrative of the murder. Henry stepped forward then, his calm demeanor faltering as he revealed his own connection, one that tied him irrevocably to the victim and to the night that changed everything. The room grew heavy with the weight of these disclosures. Eleanor felt the storm's fury mirrored in the charged atmosphere. Each revelation a bolt of lightning illuminating the dark corners of a century-old mystery. As the night deepened, voices rose and fell, confessions spilling forth like the rain flooding the grounds outside. The family's fractured past was laid bare, jealousy, betrayal, and long-buried resentments intertwined in a web far more complex than Eleanor had imagined. Yet amid the chaos, a clearer picture emerged. The murder was no longer a shadowy enigma, but a puzzle whose pieces were beginning to fit together. Eleanor's journalist instincts sharpened. Every whispered admission, every tear-streaked apology was a clue. But the night was far from over. The storm outside showed no sign of abating, and Eleanor knew the revelations made tonight would have consequences she had yet to foresee. Trust was fragile, and the mansion's walls seemed to listen, holding secrets still waiting to be uncovered. As the clock chimed midnight, Eleanor looked around at those gathered, weary, vulnerable, and forever changed by the night's confessions. She understood then that the journey into the mansion's past was only just beginning. "We must keep going," Eleanor said softly, her voice steady despite the tempest. "The truth is within our grasp, but it will demand courage and honesty from all of us." Outside, lightning split the sky, a brilliant flash illuminating the foreboding silhouette of the Victorian mansion, a house alive with secrets, and tonight, a house where the past had finally begun to speak. The night of revelations had arrived, and with it, a promise that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning air was thick with a cold dampness as Eleanor Blake ascended the narrow staircase to the secret room once more. The mansion, cloaked in the stillness of dawn, creaked under the weight of its own history. She had returned to the hidden chamber with a determined purpose to revisit the last letter she had discovered, one that promised to unravel the tangled web of the century-old murder. Pushing open the heavy door, the faint scent of aged paper and polished wood greeted her. Her eyes darted immediately to the desk where she had placed the letter the night before, but the envelope was gone. An unsettling void sat in its place, the surface eerily bare. Eleanor's heart quickened, disbelief clawing at her chest. She crouched, scanning the floor for any thinner scrap of paper. A dropped seal, a telltale footprint. Nothing. The disappearance was deliberate. Someone had stolen the letter. The weight of suspicion hung heavily in the air as Eleanor closed the door behind her. She knew the significance of what was missing. That letter was the key to unlocking secrets long buried, a confession or revelation that could finally illuminate the dark corners of the family's past. Now, the path seemed shrouded in deeper mystery. Back in the drawing room, the atmosphere was charged. Eleanor gathered the relatives and household staff, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "The letter I found in the secret room, it's gone, missing." Gasps and murmurs spread among the assembled faces. Charles Merrick's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with a shadow of something unreadable. Margaret Hale's lips pressed into a thin line, while James Thornton, the housekeeper, shifted uneasily. Who would do such a thing? Eleanor demanded, scanning the room. Who here has something to hide? The flickering flames of the fireplace cast long shadows that seemed to dance with the tension in the room. Charles cleared his throat, his voice measured. Accusations without proof serve no one. We must remain calm and rational. Eleanor nodded slowly. Of course, but we cannot ignore the fact that trust is eroding within these walls. This theft suggests someone fears what the letter contains. Later that afternoon, Eleanor found herself walking the garden paths with Margaret Hale. The scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers enveloped them as the sun slipped behind heavy clouds. Margaret's voice was low, filled with quiet concern. "Eleanor, I've lived near the mansion for years. There are things people would rather keep buried. If the letter is missing, it means the past is not done with us yet." Eleanor looked to Margaret, drawing strength from her gentle presence. "I need allies, Margaret. This house holds more secrets than I imagined, and I can't unravel them alone." Margaret nodded, her eyes reflecting the dimming light. "You have mine, but tread carefully. Some truths come at a cost." Across the mansion, Charles Merrick sat alone in his study. The soft glow of a desk lamp flickered over his lined face as he stared at empty hands. The silence was thick, oppressive. He clenched his fists, battling the guilt that gnawed at him. The letter's disappearance was his doing, or at least, it felt that way. He had taken it in a moment of desperation, fearing the damage its contents could wreak upon the family's fragile facade. As night fell, Eleanor stood before the fireplace, the flickering flames mirroring the turmoil within her. The vanishing letter was more than a lost piece of paper. It was a challenge, a threat that the mansion's shadows were not yet ready to surrender their secrets. She resolved to dig deeper, to confront the fractures of trust and expose the truth, no matter the cost. The game had changed. The past was fighting back, and Eleanor was caught in its relentless grip. Who had taken the letter, and why? The answers lay hidden in whispered lies and veiled glances, waiting for the light of discovery. But with each step forward, Eleanor knew the dangers multiplied. The mansion's secrets were alivened. Someone was determined to keep them that way. As she prepared for what was to come, Eleanor felt a chill trace her spine. The silence of the house was no longer just empty space. It was charged with watchful eyes and quiet threats. The vanished letter was a warning, a signal that the shadows still held power, and the truth might yet slip through her fingers. Determined and wary, Eleanor set her resolve. Tomorrow, the search would continue, but tonight, the house whispered its secrets only to those brave enough to listen them. Eleanor was listening closely, ready to uncover whatever darkness lay ahead. The night was thick with silence, save for the occasional creak of aged wood settling within the mansion's vast bones. Eleanor sat by the fireplace in the drawing room. The warm glow from the flames flickering across the yellowed papers spread before her. Each letter bore names and dates that painted a tangled web. But the more she read, the more the threads seemed to fray rather than connect. The script of Lillian, of others long gone, hinted at betrayals and hidden truths, but never delivered a clear answer. She tapped a pen against her lips, eyes narrowing as she tried to reconcile the conflicting accounts. Some letters spoke of innocence, others whispered accusations. The words danced in her mind, refusing to settle into a coherent story. It was as if each writer had their own version of the past, each hiding something behind carefully chosen phrases. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Agnes Whitmore entered, her presence as formidable as the mansion's stone walls. "Miss Blake," she said, voice steady but laced with warning. "Some histories are best left undisturbed." Eleanor met her gaze with equal firmness. "I'm not here to preserve illusions, Mrs. Whitmore. I want the truth." Agnes's eyes narrowed, a shadow crossing her features. "Truth has a price. Are you prepared to pay it?" The room felt charged. Eleanor could almost hear the unspoken threats weaving between them. Agnes was protective perhaps, too protective of the family's secrets, but whether from loyalty or fear, Eleanor couldn't tell. Later, Eleanor found herself wandering the garden under the moon's pale light. The cool air was sharp against her skin, and the rustling leaves whispered like ghostly confidants. The isolation gnawed at her, feeding the suspicions that no one here was entirely honest. Every shadow seemed to hold a watcher, every silence a withheld secret. Back inside, a meeting with Miles Hartley in the cramped library offered both hope and frustration. His knowledge of the family's history was invaluable, yet his own motives were cloaked in mystery. They argued over interpretations, his calm logic clashing with her journalistic instincts. Was he a trustworthy ally or another piece in the puzzle? "We must proceed carefully," Miles urged, voice low. "The past is not just a story to be told, it's a minefield." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Then we'll just have to navigate it together." But as the night deepened, so did her doubts. Each conversation, each discovery, seemed to raise more questions than answers. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, yet she needed allies if she hoped to unravel the century-old murder. Her journal lay open on the table, a reminder of her purpose. The letters, the shadows, the whispered warnings, they all demanded to be understood, and Eleanor resolved that no matter how deep the suspicion, she would follow the truth wherever it led, even if it meant standing alone against the darkness. The clock chimed midnight, its echo a solemn call to arms. The game was far from over, and Eleanor knew that the next move could change everything. The evening had settled into a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire in the grand hearth of the drawing room. Eleanor Blake sat hunched over a fragile yellowed letter, the edges fraying like the tangled threads of the mystery she was unraveling. Her eyes flicked over the cursive handwriting of Lillian, a voice from the past that whispered of betrayal and sorrow. The mansion around her groaned softly under the weight of time, shadows pooling in the corners as if eager to swallow the light whole. A sudden, sharp knock shattered the quiet, startling Eleanor so much that a breath escaped her lips in a small gasp. The sound echoed eerily through the vast hallway beyond. She rose cautiously, her heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and unease. With deliberate steps, she crossed the creaking floorboards and opened the heavy front door a crack. No one stood in the moonlit porch, only the chill wind that swept through the overgrown garden. But as she peered into the darkness, a folded note fluttered at her feet. Bending down, Eleanor picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly as she unfolded the paper. The message was brief, chilling in its simplicity. Leave now or suffer the consequences. A shiver ran down her spine, but she folded the note with a steady hand and locked the door behind her. This was no longer a game of uncovering dusty family secrets. It was a warning. Someone wanted her to stop. That night, sleep evaded her. The mansion's creaks and groans seemed louder, more threatening. Just as dawn began to pale the sky, a slow, deliberate knock came from the library door. Eleanor opened it to find a tall figure cloaked in shadow. The man's dark coat brushed the floor, his hat pulled low over his brow. His voice was a low hiss as he spoke. "You're meddling in things better left forgotten. Leave this place, Miss Blake, before it's too late." Eleanor met his gaze, cold and unflinching. "I inherited this house, its history, and its secrets. I intend to see it through." The man's eyes glittered with something unreadable. Then he nodded once and vanished down the hallway. Eleanor closed the door, her pulse quickened but her resolve unbroken. Later, in the kitchen, Mrs. Cartwright, the housekeeper, approached with a worried expression. "Miss Blake, I've lived in this house my whole life," she said quietly, "and I've seen what happens when some truths come to light. Be careful." Eleanor appreciated the concern, but knew the path ahead was fraught with peril. Yet, the lure of truth and justice was too compelling to abandon. Standing by the attic window, she gazed out into the mansion's sprawling gardens, now swallowed by night. The moon cast silver shadows on the twisted branches and creeping ivy. Somewhere in that darkness lurked the answers and the threats. But Eleanor's heart steeled itself. She would not be driven away by fear. The story was far from over. If anything, the danger only confirmed she was on the right path. And as the first light of dawn crept through the dusty panes, Eleanor Blake prepared to face whatever awaited her in the shadows of the past. The study was shrouded in the soft glow of candlelight, the only illumination coming from the flickering flame that cast long shadows across the worn oak desk. Eleanor Blake leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she spread out the collection of letters before her. Each parchment, yellowed with age and delicate to the touch, was a fragment of a story long buried beneath layers of time and silence. Her fingers traced the faded ink, the cursive script speaking of secrets and sorrow. But it was the subtle irregularities in the handwriting that caught her attention. For hours, she compared the letters, aligning dates with events and cross-referencing the names mentioned. The mansion's creaks and groans seemed to quiet around her, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to uncover what had been hidden for so long. Eleanor's journalistic instincts buzzed with the thrill of discovery. She was no longer just an inheritor of a dilapidated estate, but an investigator unraveling a tangled family web. Her breakthrough came unexpectedly. Among the letters penned by Lillian Hawthorne, a woman whose life had been overshadowed by tragedy, Eleanor noticed an odd sequence of letters that didn't fit the flow of the narrative, a cipher embedded within the text. Pulling out her notebook, Eleanor began to decode the message, each symbol revealing a word, each word a clue. The cipher spoke of a child, a secret kept from the world, a lineage erased from the family records. The revelation sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. this was no mere scandal. It was a hidden identity that could explain the motives behind the century-old murder that had haunted the mansion's halls. The very foundation of what she thought she knew about the Hawthorne family was crumbling. Eager to confirm the cipher's implication, Eleanor ventured into the attic, the air thick with dust and memories. The narrow beam of her flashlight danced across forgotten trunks and cobwebbed corners until it landed on a small, locked box tucked away beneath a pile of old coats. The lock gave way with a satisfying click, revealing a faded portrait of a childer boy with striking features that bore a resemblance to none of the known family members. As Eleanor held the portrait, a flood of questions overwhelmed her. Who was this child? How had he been concealed for so long? And most importantly, what role did he play in the dark history of the mansion? That evening, the storm outside mirrored the turmoil within. Lightning flashed, illuminating the parlor where Eleanor faced Mr. Ambrose Gale, the mysterious man whose knowledge of the mansion's past had both intrigued and unnerved her. Their conversation crackled with tension, words sharp as the thunder outside. Ambrose revealed fragments of truths long suppressed, confirming Eleanor's suspicions about the family's hidden sins. The room felt charged, the weight of unspoken secrets pressing down on them both. Eleanor's resolve hardened. She would not rest until every piece of the puzzle was laid bare. Back in the study, by the soft glow of the lamplight, Eleanor began to write. Her pen moved swiftly across the paper as she documented the discovery of the secret heir, the cipher's message, and the implications for the murder case. The task was daunting, but beneath the fatigue was a fierce determination. The truth was within reach, and she was ready to claim it. As the night deepened, Eleanor paused, her gaze drifting to the window where the first light of dawn threatened the darkness. The shadows that had haunted the mansion were beginning to recede, but new mysteries had taken their place. The hidden identity was a key, but it also raised new questions that would lead her deeper into the labyrinth of family secrets. With a steady breath, Eleanor sealed her letter, the story far from over. The century-old murder was no longer just a cold case. It was a living mystery, and she was determined to see it through to the end. The mansion held its secrets close, but Eleanor Blake was ready to unearth them all.